All right, so today I want to introduce you to some dead and dying ball python genes and some that are at risk of being phased out. As a matter of fact, I found an old video over on YouTube where one breeder was so excited about one of these genes, it actually made some really flashy combinations, and he took a bunch of males with this gene in it, and he was breeding it through his whole collection, probably hundreds, if not thousands of female breeders, and he was trying to produce all these hatchlings. And here, all these years later, the ball python industry has pretty much abandoned that gene, and as a matter of fact, if you actually go over on morphmarket.com, you won't see one single ball python with that gene in it. It's pretty much extinct when it comes to the ball python industry. There's another gene that kind of kicked off right when I started breeding ball pythons. That's the gene that kind of got me into the whole thing. And the kind of the crazy thing is I went to my first NARBC show, and everyone, I'd say pretty much all the breeders, the majority of their snakes in their display cases that they were selling, all these hatchlings, had that gene in the mix. Then they mark up the price really high. And now all these years later, pretty much everyone's kind of abandoning the project and it's dying a slow death. You see fewer and fewer people actually producing it. And there's also some other reptile industries over on other continents that are banning genes, which is kind of crazy. Here in America, I'd say most of the genes are kind of like a wide open. It's pretty much at the discretion of the breeders in kind of common opinion, but over there, they're actually breeding quite a few genes. I went over there and I found some genes that they're banning, some that are really surprising that they've actually banned at some of these reptile shows. And one of them that I think is a mistake, and it's not a mistake as far as my opinion. I think it's actually a typo that someone said, hey, let's ban this gene, and that person told someone else and got lost in the translation. And when they finally wrote it down, I think they wrote down the wrong gene because it doesn't really make sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over the internet. I want to show you some of these interesting and almost extinct, in some cases, ball python genes. All right, so I want to jump over here on morphmarket.com, and I want to start with this snake right here. This is a normal ball python, just a normal wild type with no genes in it. And the reason I wanted to start with this is because I want to show you the next one and how it really looks like an interesting normal looking ball python. So take a look at this. This is a normal. This over here, this is the desert, which is kind of interesting that people can pick out one snake out of a whole sea of normals and say, yeah, I think there's something in there. And this, at the time, when this first came out, people are going crazy over it. This is the ball python that's pretty much extinct over here on Morph Market. As a matter of fact, for the new snakes, you can't find any deserts over here for sale at all. This is one that had sold back in 2022. And when I first started in ball pythons, the desert was actually kind of being phased out. You could buy the males and the females, but lately I haven't seen any deserts being posted over here. So what I want to do is I want to show you the potential of the desert ball python and why people really went crazy over this. So the desert is actually a co-dominant gene. So you take a desert, you breed it through your collection, half the offspring come out as desert. And I wanted to show you one combination with two other genes mixed in with the desert so you can really see the potential of what the desert can do. The first gene I want to show you is the Enchi. I looked over here on Morph Market for all the different Enchis. I'd say this is probably one of the most impressive single gene Enchis over here on Morph Market. Just look at how beautiful the snake is. An Enchi is known as a pattern reducer. So you can see the pattern is really reduced compared to a normal ball python. And a lot of your Enchis will bring in a lot of color too. So this one is bringing in a lot of yellow. I've seen some Enchis bring in kind of an orangish yellow. Some of them are like super bright. This is one of the brighter ones over here. So I also wanted to mix in some pinstripe. Take a look at this. This is one of my favorite genes, I'd say. This is just the single gene pinstripe. Makes for a really gold colored snake. This is pretty cool how it just has this kind of these bands coming up on the side that I haven't really seen in a pinstripe. That is pretty awesome pinstripe right here. And this is what happens if you mix the Enchi with the pinstripe. And let me tell you, this is probably the best version of an Enchi pinstripe that I've seen over here. I was trying to get the brightest snakes, the most possible, the best looking snakes where you can see what the desert does to some of these snakes. So this is the Enchi pinstripe with the Enchi. You can see the orange coming in from the Enchi and the pattern reduction from the Enchi compared to the regular pinstripe. And the pinstripe is really visually dominant, so you can see a really solid gold right down the top of the stick. A lot of the times with pinstripe, you'll actually see the pinstripe pattern coming through in most of your combinations with pinstripe. So here's what happens when you add desert in with the Enchi pinstripe. Take a look at this. People were just like blown away by this snake right here, and it was just like a frenzy to try to get desert through their collection, which is kind of crazy, and it just kind of fizzled out. And the reason the desert fizzled out is because there was a problem with the females. And the females had a problem with infertility. A lot of times they'd lay a lot of slugs, and in a lot of cases the females would get egg bound and they would die in the process of laying eggs. And I'd say in some cases, from what I've heard, some of the females actually did produce viable eggs and you could actually hatch those eggs. But it sounds like in most cases the females would either produce just all slugs and never produce a viable clutch, or they would die when laying eggs. And then they kind of realized that was the problem, and they kind of abandoned the whole project because of the problem with the females. And that's why the whole thing collapsed. But let me tell you, these are some of the most impressive combinations. And I would say today, without the desert, there is an alternative, and that is the desert ghost. So you don't really want to confuse the desert with the desert ghost because they're two different genes. This is a co-dominant, which is the desert. And take a look at this one. This is an Enchi pinstripe desert ghost. So this is like the closest version we could get to, I'd say. I don't know if it's as impressive as the desert, because the desert was just so impressive, but I'd say a close second would be the desert ghost. The problem with the desert ghost is it's actually a recessive gene. So essentially you take this snake and you breed it through your collection, you would get all hets, just one copy of the gene, which is not a visual. Then you'd have to take the offspring, grow them up for a few years, and then breed them back in order to try to get two genes of the desert ghost into your combinations in order to actually see the visual. So that's the challenge with the desert ghost. And that's why the desert, people are going crazy over it. There's like, I don't want to mess with the desert ghost. I just want to breed the desert through my collection and have these snakes that are even brighter than the desert ghost. And unfortunately, the whole thing collapsed. So here's another one I wanted to show you. This is actually the scaleless head. And when I first started in ball pythons, these people are going crazy over these scaleless heads. And if you actually see, just on the top of the head, there's just a few scales missing from the top of the head. That's how you could tell the scaleless head gene was in there. And if you actually had two copies of the scaleless head, you would end up with a completely scaleless ball python. And take a look at this. I actually produced some of these, some males and some females. And it's really a weird snake, unlike any ball python. If you actually feel a scaleless ball python, it almost feels like jelly or something. It's like really soft and gushy. It's a really weird, it's almost like you're touching really soft skin. It's a weird effect on the ball python. And one of the problems that I had when I had my scaleless, I produced some completely scaleless ball pythons. And of course, almost every scaleless ball python you produced was a world first because it was just coming out. One of the main problems was the shedding. And because they don't have scales, they can't keep in the humidity. And every single shed was a bad shed. And every time the snake would shed, you'd have to bring it up to the sink and peel off the shed and give it a bath. And it was such a pain. I was actually trying to do all kinds of different, like bag balm and everything on my snake. I tried moss in there, like wet moss. I tried to like completely saturate the coconut husk. And the weird thing was the coconut husk would actually stain the belly of the scaleless snake to like this kind of like a reddish orange brown color. It was weird. It was like it was coming off on the snake. But the main problem with the scaleless ball python is, again, the females. So as far as I know, no one's actually produced eggs from a female scaleless. And I think it has something to do with their metabolism, where they just can't form the eggs. And it's unfortunate that this project is kind of collapsing because no one's been able to, as far as I know, no one's been able to actually have a female lay viable eggs, which is kind of crazy. So if you actually go over on morphmarket.com, you'll actually see some scaleless heads for sale, but you won't see, as a matter of fact, right now I went over there and out of all their snakes, there wasn't a single completely scaleless ball python over there. And I think this project is kind of winding down. I think more people are getting out of it. As a matter of fact, I still have 2 ball pythons in my collection that are scaleless heads, and I have them up for sale over on Morph Market. It's an interesting project. If you've never felt a completely scaleless ball python, you should see if you can find a breeder that has one, or maybe go to a show and actually handle one. And when I first started in scaleless ball pythons, I'd go to the show and people were so protective of the totally scaleless ball pythons. They wouldn't let anybody even handle them. It was pretty crazy. But maybe now things are kind of dwindling down. Maybe someone will actually let you handle their completely scaleless ball python. So here's another snake that's alive and active over here in the United States, and that is the spider. And the spider is a really awesome morph. It's been around from the very beginning, and the spider almost looks like it has calico in it, even though it's just one single gene, the spider. It's kind of an interesting effect on the spider. Some spiders have a lot of calico effect coming up, not really a calico gene in there. But pretty much they're known for this spider web pattern right down the top of the snake. And I'd say when it comes to spider, it's probably one of the king of combos when it comes to codominant morphs. Because if you actually mix other genes into it, take a look at this. I pulled up a spider pastel, and take a look at this. Just one copy of the pastel and you get the bumblebee. This is like, you know, the whole market took off on spiders. The problem with spiders is that it has a head wobble in some cases. Sometimes it's an extreme head wobble. Sometimes there's no head wobble at all. As a matter of fact, I had a pastel spider desert ghost female in my collection. That thing was magnificent. It was unbelievable. And I did breed it one year because people are asking for spiders. I produced a few spiders. None of the offspring had any kind of a head wobble, and that pastel desert ghost didn't have any head wobble at all. And as a matter of fact, I got rid of all my spider stuff, and then here lately, someone at work, when I was working a day job, gave me a couple snakes, and one of them was a big male spider. And he does have a little bit of head wobble when he's feeding. Yeah, only when he's feeding, though, because I can dangle a rat in there. He eats every single time, and he'll kind of, you know, move his head back and forth, just kind of shake it a little bit, and then grab the rat. But if I actually pick him up, he's perfectly fine. You won't see that head wobble. And in some extreme cases, they have complete loss of equilibrium, which is kind of crazy. As a matter of fact, I actually came over here. This is actually the International Herpetological Society over in the UK. And take a look at this. Important notice, banned morphs over in the UK. You come down here, they're banning the spider royal python, the spider ball python. They've actually banned it over here in the UK. And actually, also, if you're actually wondering where that is, take a look at this. This is over here, right here in the UK. They have banned it. And it seems like since they banned the spider, a lot of other reptile shows and the reptile industry at large is kind of picking up what they've banned. And believe it or not, I actually came over here on a Facebook page and found the Facebook page from that same place, the International Herpetological Society, and they update the banned list. And take a look at this. They have 4 snakes on here now. One of them is the Super Champagne, the Super Cinnamon, the Super Black Pastel, and the Spider. And one thing that kind of stuck out to me, like right at first, is like the Super Champagne. If you know anything about champagnes, if you actually take a champagne, you breed it to another champagne, 25% of the time, you get a Super Champagne. But the problem is the Super Champagne is a lethal combination. And as far as I know, no one has ever produced a viable Super Champagne. As a matter of fact, you can actually go over to morphmarket.com and look for the Super Champagne, and there's never been one over there. Out of almost 600,000 snakes posted over on Morph Market over all these years, there's not one Super Champagne. So, as a matter of fact, I actually saw one video where there was an egg cutting where they did breed a champagne to a champagne. They cut the egg, and there was a Super Champagne inside. It was an all-white snake. but I'm not sure how viable it is if anyone's actually taken like a super champagne and grew it up to an adult super champagne. If anyone has ever seen a video that that has a super champagne grown up, proven to where you can breed it to something else and actually produce a whole clutch of champagnes, I would definitely like to see it down in the comments, because I don't think it actually exists. So I think this is actually a typo, the super champagne. I think what they really meant to say is they wanted to ban the champagne, because the champagne is really close to the spider. I'd say in a lot of cases you don't get the head wobble, but still in some cases with the champagne it's similar to the spider, where sometimes you can get a loss of equilibrium or a head wobble. So I think this is a typo over here. I think they meant to ban the champagne instead of list the super champagne. The super cinnamon and the super black pastel, that is interesting. That was really surprising to me that they would ban those two. So in those two, sometimes you can get kinking of the spines, sometimes you can get duck billing, but you know, I don't know. It does, when you're banning those two, it seems like not only are you banning those two supers, but you're also banning a lot of other awesome combinations that you can actually make with those. So I pulled up some combinations that are really well known in the ball python industry. And one of them is the Panda Pied. So take a look at this. This sold for $10,000. And take a look at this snake. This is an amazing black and white. Everyone tries to reproduce this with other genes to try to avoid the super black pastel on this one. So this would actually be banned over in the UK, since they're banning the super black pastel. But yeah, that's crazy that you're banning Panda Pieds. Here's another one they're actually banning too, is the Silver Bullet. Silver Bullet is the super cinnamon pastel, and some of these silver bullets can be really silver, almost like a metallic color. It's a really awesome combination. Here's another snake they're actually banning, since they're banning those two supers. They're banning the super pewter, which is the super cinnamon super pastel, which is kind of crazy. And then the ultimate one that they're banning, which I'm really sad about, is this one over here. They're banning the urban camo. And take a look at this. There's no other snake that looks like this, like really weird splotches of cement and mud on the snake. These are really awesome. I've seen some really awesome urban camos. And this one's actually, to make an urban camo, essentially what it is, it's a super cinnamon. Usually there's just one copy of the pastel. You can put two copies in there. It doesn't really change anything. So this is a super cinnamon, super pastel, sandblast, and het pied. And it's interesting, with just the het pied, you get kind of this ringer coming up the snake. That's kind of the influence of the het pied. And then this is, well, since it's super cinnamon, super pastel, essentially what it is it's a super pewter. You see the super pewter is the super cinnamon, super pastel. So this would kind of be like a super pewter urban camo instead of the true urban camo that people consider, with the super cinnamon and just one copy of the pastel. But I found that kind of interesting that they're starting to ban a lot of these overseas, and I would say it's only a matter of time before some of this stuff comes over here, which is pretty crazy. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Frank Hardtail asks, I've been keeping 6 ball pythons together in the same enclosure for 17 years, and they all eat consistently every other week. Apparently I've been doing a lot of things wrong, but how can it be wrong if it's been working for so long? And that is one of the most interesting questions that I've actually had. As a matter of fact, I saw one other person that keeps a male and a female together full time, and all she does is reach in the enclosure once a year and pull out the eggs and throw them in the incubator, which is an interesting way to go. But as far as breeders, I'd say we're a little bit more regulated when it comes to breeders, because we want to make sure certain males breed certain females. So for example, if you had a mix of males and females in there, you'd want to make sure certain males aren't just breeding all your females. You really want to control what your output is as far as your hatchlings and the genes. The other thing, as far as breeders, I think we really want to dial in when we have our clutches of eggs, and we can kind of dial them in for when the reptile shows are really going strong. Usually in the fall, fall, a lot of people have a lot of new hatchlings. And then in the spring, there's usually some stragglers from the previous year that are left over. A lot of times you can get a deal on some of the spring hatchlings because they're a little bit bigger and people just want to unload them. They're starting to eat bigger rodents. Sometimes you can get a pretty good deal. But I'd say in most cases, people will separate them. But it seems like from what I'm hearing from multiple people, you can actually keep multiple ball pythons in the same enclosure. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.